Hello and welcome. I'm Erin Cuthbert, footballer for Chelsea and the Scotland national team, and you're listening to the Blue Day podcast.
Fellow Chelsea supporters, here at the Blue Day podcast, I am very pleased to welcome my guest on the show today. He made 27 appearances for the club, scoring 2 goals. Plus, he played alongside the likes of Clive Walker, Colin Lee, and Mike Fillery. Here is Kevin Hales. Kevin, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Keith, and thanks for inviting me on.
Kevin, the pleasure's all mine. Let's start the interview swiftly, can we? What was the moment you decided that you wanted to become a professional footballer?
Wow, that's a tough one. I suppose obviously growing up and you get your eye coordination for the ball and stuff like that. Obviously, I enjoyed watching it, so I just wanted to play it. And thankfully, I was lucky enough to fulfil my dream of doing that. So, at a young age, we played Sunday football like everybody else does, and you chuck your own kids into that sort of environment. I really enjoyed that. Thankfully, I was quite good at it, and just see where it took me. And I've had a very good career, and I'm very happy with what I've done in it.
Who were your idols growing up as a kid?
Well, I've only got one, and that was the famous Chelsea legend. That is John Holland. I was a little midfield player myself, and he just epitomised everything I wanted to do as a player, both on and off the pitch. He was just, an icon to look up to, and carried himself very well, as everybody's aware. Yeah, just John Hollins all the way through.
Now, fast forward a little bit. You would come through the youth ranks at Chelsea. What was that like for you?
But it was fantastic. Listen, I was a Chelsea supporter as a youngster, so I used to go and stand on the shed and stuff like that whenever I could get up there. Um, so to fulfill that dream and start my journey as probably a 13, 14-year-old, the East Stand had just gone up, and it was the all singing, all dancing new stand. And we used to do a little bit of a Tuesday or Thursday evening training underneath the stand when the weather was bad and such forth. So that was the start, probably 13, 14. And then after that, I was lucky enough to be offered an apprenticeship, probably in 1977 that was. So I got offered a 2-year apprenticeship. The thing about it in those days was the apprenticeship scheme was over 2 years, and you could only in those days have a maximum of 15 apprentices in those days. So the year prior to me joining, there was already 12. So, obviously that narrowed down to 3 spots for the second year, which obviously I was part of. And it was great because I'd grown up with Mickey Fillery and Colin Pates, and there was a lot of other very, very good players along that our age as well. But they could only take 3 on, and that was myself, Colin Pates, and Mickey Fillery. So 2 other guys that alongside me probably did better things for Chelsea, but all 3 of us were fortunate enough to be taken on, and then obviously we were fortunate enough to play in the first team along the way. So yeah, really good days.
In regards to your first team debut, you would make it in November of 1979. It would be in a 7-3 win over Leyton Orient. What were your memories of that particular time for you?
Yeah, I think it was really mad because I think I got called up last minute to be on the bench, and obviously Colin Pates was I think he made his debut that day and he played, and so I know another sort of legend of mine was obviously John Bumpsy, but he's just a few years older than me, and he came off towards the end, and yeah, I got my chance to go on, and I remember Lee Frost and Clive Walker just being, on form that day, and the goals were going in, quite easily for us. But then again, we was letting a few in, so it was a 7-3 scoreline is not something that you hear much of, but. Yeah, obviously fantastic for me to get on the pitch for 5 or 10 minutes, and I enjoyed that immensely.
You mentioned Clive Walker. How good was he as a footballer?
He probably he was just so quick and direct, which you don't really see. I mean, we all saw the England game the other night, and he said about his wingers not being direct or anything. In the old days, back in those days, Clive Walker, Lee Frost had pace to burn, and were allowed to go directly at players. And that's something he had. But he had two good feet as well. I think primarily he was a left footer, but his right foot he could get across in, and in those days he could go outside or inside. So yeah, he was very good.
So Jeff Hurst was the manager at the time of you making your debut. What was he like with you?
Um, Yeah, yeah, bit of a strange one, really. Him and Bobby Gould were both like different characters. Bobby was the life and soul, and obviously Jeff Hurst was obviously the manager, and probably sat back a little bit more and watched what was going on. So, listen, they gave me my debut. They gave me an opportunity, which I'll be forever grateful. But yeah, I didn't get. I don't think I got the opportunities that I thought I warranted. But then again, I was only young, so youngsters of today, they're so confident in their own ability, and I was at that time as well. But got a couple of opportunities, but it's a results industry, and they needed to get results. So yeah.
And it was around about this period in terms of Chelsea going from the 70s to the 80s where results were very inconsistent. When you look back on that particular team that you was involved in the early part, why do you think that was that the consistency was just not there?
It's a really difficult question to pinpoint because the players that were there around 78, 79, 80 when I was there were we just added a couple of people. David Speedy comes to mind, who gave us a little bit of an edge up front, and that's not knocking Colin Lee and the people that were in there already. So I think yeah, Chelsea just needed to go to another level, and they brought a couple of players in, and that took them to that level. So it's just football in general, just to improve the team week in, week out.
And you had a couple of appearances afterwards from your debut, but it would be nearly 18 months before you would return to the first team on a regular basis. Was you frustrated with the length of not being involved with the first team?
I don't think so. I, I was an apprentice when I got my opportunity in '79. I was 17 years of age, so it was unbelievable that I got that opportunity. Probably through injuries or suspensions and stuff like that in those days. But I had the 2 years where I had my apprenticeship, so I was still learning the game, and coming out of youth football into men's football was a massive jump. So yeah, I can always remember the next time I got an opportunity. Really weird. You might remember it, probably not, because you're such a young lad. But it was in 1980 where I was just out and about. I had to get my car mended or something. Then all of a sudden, I was at the mechanics, and then I got a call up say, "Listen, I need someone's gone down sick. We need you to play." And it was a frosty, icy evening against Wigan in the FA Cup in January 1980, and I always remember it fondly because it was a day after my birthday. So I'd sort of just turned 19 as such. So I got that late shout, and we were playing on. In those days, I can remember. I think we were clearing the straw off the pitch and such forth, which that the players of today don't have that luxury. And I always remember playing in trainers, which was really weird as well. But yeah, and we got beat 1-0. So that was probably the beginning of the downfall, probably.
Fast forward a little bit to December of 1981, you would end up scoring your first goal for Chelsea, and it was in a 2-1 win over Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
How just a couple of points. How relieved was you to finally get off the mark for Chelsea? And do you still remember the goal?
Seriously, I remember it fondly, as probably most players do their first goal. It was. I'm probably going to big it up and say it's probably one of those goals that people would probably be seeing time after time after time in this modern day game now, because I remember intercepting the ball probably just outside our 18-yard box, running the length of pitch, done a 1-2 with Clive Walker and stuck it in the back of the net. So, yeah, absolutely unbelievable feeling that I was able to get my first goal at Chelsea. So fantastic feeling.
And at this point in time, John Neal was the Chelsea coach. What was he like with you, and what difference was there between John Neal and Sir Geoff Hurst?
I think mainly it was around his experience. He'd come from Middlesbrough, I believe. Um, it's like everything. You don't know how you're going to get on with any particular manager. He he just liked my style of play, and stuck me in the team. It fitted around how he wanted to play, and he gave me lots of opportunities, and just said, go out and do what you can do. That's why I'm putting you in the team. I'm still very young, but yeah, he gave me him, and when Ian McNeil come in as his assistant, they gave me massive confidence to go out there and play and enjoy playing football, and yeah, they gave me a great opportunity.
One notable game that Chelsea had in the early 80s was in the FA Cup fifth round against Liverpool, February of 1982. We would win the match 2-0. What was the overall atmosphere and overall day like for you on at the bridge that day?
I think it's probably the game that I talk about a lot if I have to chuck one in against some people that are a lot younger than me, because they probably don't remember that. But it's yeah, listen, the build up to the game. I always remember the week before we went to Vidal Sassoon to have our haircuts and stuff like that, which was up the King's Road, and it was a bit mad. It's probably back to where Alan Hudson and all those sort of people used to do it in the glamour days. But we got a little bit of a taste of that. But the whole build up to the game, both me and Colin Pape we did a little bit of press and stuff like that because we were young guys and we'd come up together, and I remember that so well. But the game was, and the atmosphere and Stamford Bridge being absolutely ramo. Was a fantastic period, fantastic opportunity to play. But we're playing against the mighty Liverpool. You just reel off their team, and it was like name after name after name. And we're probably going into it thinking we're going to get a battering, but don't worry, it's one of those fixtures that was probably a nice earner for the club, which was probably needed at that time. And we just went out there with no concerns, no worries, just go and play a game. And we came off winning 2-0. And I remember a corner come over in the last minute, a defending corner. And I think it was Peter Barota in those days came out and gave me a final punch to the top of my head. I went down, and next thing I know, I heard the whistle, and then I was bundled off with supporters running all over the pitch, which they used to do in those days. So, yeah, an unbelievable game, an unbelievable feeling, and one I'll never forget.
What was that moment like when Peter Rhodes Brown's shot was sort of basically trickling into that bottom corner of the net for the first goal?
Yeah, sort of. Obviously, Rhodesy was a little bit younger than me, but came up with me in apprenticeship as a year younger. So yeah, that left foot shot, and I can also remember Colin Lee's diving header in the second half, which probably sealed it. And then we went running behind the goal at the shed end and trying to celebrate. But that was a long old run behind the goal in those days, because that shed end was a lot further back than it is now. So yeah, great feelings. I mean, when the final whistle went, it was great. The only disappointment for me was I got a little bit of an injury in a game against Norwich just after that, and I missed. The good thing about John Neal, he kept me in and about the team, and I sat on the bench against Tottenham in the next round, which we got beat 4-3. So I was really disappointed not to play in that game because I picked up an injury, but I sat on the bench that day, and another fantastic full house for the club and everybody. But yeah, just disappointed that I didn't play in that game.
A month later from this match, you would score in a 4-1 romp over Leicester City. A big
Yeah,
result for us at the time, but in terms of the actual season, it was quite a disappointing one in terms of where we finished.
yeah, it was. But I, again, as a child, I always wanted to score at the shed end, and I'd scored at the away end for the goal against Sheffield Wednesday. And fortunately, like the big 5'7" of me rose at the far stick and stuck one in with a header at the far post and just ran to the shed like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, that stick. Listen, I wasn't. I was on another planet then, so I didn't really realise what the season might hold or what it didn't hold. It was just that I'd scored a goal for Chelsea at the shed end, and it just meant the world to me. And yeah, we went on. I think we won 2-1, and I think in the end, something like that.
I want to fast forward a little bit now to the summer of 1983. You would end up leaving Chelsea on a free transfer. You would go to Leyton Orient. How did this move come about for you, and what was it like in the build up to your departure?
I think it's so different to what it is now. You get the hype around transfers and stuff like that. Listen, I was a young lad. I got an opportunity to play in the first team, and I just wanted to play football. And I wanted to play first team football if I could. I played a lot of games in the combination in those days. Unfortunately, I got a really horrific knee injury at Barnsley away back in 1982, and then I got the stigma after that of oh you're not as good as you used to be. So that comes along. They may have been right, they may not have been, but I just wanted to play, and I'd had that week in, week out experience of playing, and then I was back in the reserves, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So um, I had a year left on my contract, so it wasn't a case of I had to go, but I think that was the beginning of the change for John Neal to change a few things around, bring a couple of other players in, and you know, I went, listen, I want to play football. And I was put on the transfer list, and Leyton Orient came in with a couple of other teams. So in that summer was a busy summer for me. One, I was getting married, and two, I needed to sort myself out. Although I knew I had another year left. That in football, you never know what would go on. I could have got back in the team. I might not have got back in the team. Who knows? But Leyton Orient came in. I went and spoke to them. I went and spoke to Reading. And sometimes, I just wanted to be playing. So I took a step back and I went to Leyton Orient at the end of the day. And it worked out for me because I spent 10 fantastic years there and played 350, 400 games. And my knee stood up to something when they turned around to me and said, I might not never play again. So, that was obviously fantastic. But to have to leave, my childhood dream club was a bit different. But I'd got married. I'd just got a house. I needed to make sure that, I had to pay the bills and stuff like that. So I went and signed a 2-year contract there. So didn't have to leave, but I felt it was the right opportunity to do it. And, I just wanted to play football.
Just one final question on this particular subject. Did it take you a while to get used to the fact that you left Chelsea to then go to Leyton Orient? What was the mindset like for you from, as you said, being part of that particular environment to then something completely different?
Yeah, I had my mindset I had my mind in a good space because, like I keep saying, and in those days it wasn't necessarily about the money so much. You got paid a little bit more than maybe a standard person going to work in those days, but not the money that there is around now. And it was just a love of football that carried me to Leyton Orient. So I was in the first team. I was playing in front of, you know, 3 or 4 thousand spectators. Where in the combination you're playing in front of 3 or 4 uh, cats and dogs and a couple of old people that would come along. So it was just that feeling of playing in front of people and trying to showcase, and obviously trying to get back up the league if there was ever an opportunity to do that. So yeah, I had no worries about going down the league. In actual fact, I really didn't. I didn't necessarily do my homework on them because they nearly got relegated the year before or the season before I signed, and I went, "Oh my God, what have I done?" But yeah, I had that feeling. But then again, I went on and done really well there, and I was being recognised by a couple of clubs. Didn't come about. That's football. It happens. But was happy to get the 35 games a season in the first team was what I wanted to do. And yeah, I had a great time there.
Now, I want to touch on modern football if I can, Kevin, and one aspect that has still caused debate after all these sort of years that it's been in existence is VAR. What's your take on the technology that is VAR? Are you a fan of it, or do you feel that it needs to be either tweaked or even just chucked in the bin?
Hmm. Um, I've got a bit of time for it, but not a lot of time for it. It's one of those, isn't it? I think the time frame for it to come to make a decision has got to be looked at. I don't see why it's got to take that long. See, technology that we've probably got to use it, but sometimes you know, back in the day, a referee was a referee. He's not a referee now. A linesman is not a linesman now. He doesn't have to keep up with play if he doesn't want to, because if it's offside, they'll query it. And yeah, I think it's a bit frustrating. But then you see those little bits and pieces where he might have been a yard. Listen, who knows what the offside rule is? Who knows what the handball rule is? I'm really lost. I did step out of love of football for a couple of seasons, a couple of years ago when it started coming in, and the way football was played, it wasn't, there wasn't the excitement, there wasn't the entertainment. It was being overcome by IT straight lines and his hands over the line and his foot's over the line and he's look at that little bit of knee, and I'm going, where are we going? I really don't know where it's going to go, Keith. If I'm totally honest, I really don't know, but I hope it gets sorted out soon because the when we're playing over 100 minutes in a game now, it becomes a little bit worrying unless there's a bad injury or there's an injury of some sort where I'm happy to play 200 minutes because that person needs to be taken care of. But for offsides and free kicks and is it a goal, is it not a goal? Listen, I'd like to know the number of players that have gone and cheered and enjoyed cheering for a goal that 2 minutes later they never scored. And then all of a sudden, supporters have gone up in the air and gone, "Oh, that was a great goal! This, that, and the other." Next thing you know, it's back to 0-0 or whatever the score might have been before that. Yeah, I'm not a great lover of that. Listen, all I can say is Ray Wilkins back in his day was called the Crab, all right, because he used to go sideways and backwards. Well, listen, he'd be one of the best players out there at the moment because that's what the game does. And they come up with stats around. Listen, I've had 75% of possession of play in the first half, but it's still 0-0. Yeah, but you might have had 60% of that in your own half, and the goal's up the other end. You need to put that ball in the net. So, listen, that's not knocking the way the game is going because it has to move forward. I understand that, but some of the stats that come out, I'm going, listen. When people get the ball wide, why don't you put it in the box to give an opportunity to get a bit of excitement? We're an entertainment. And they turn back out and end up back at the goalkeeper. And I'm thinking, well, we was 10 yards from their goal. What's going on? That's just me. I might be a little bit old school, but I like to see a bit of excitement around the box now and again where you just chuck the ball in, it bounces down, someone sticks it in the net. Well, what's wrong with that? They'll turn around and say they did this, and right. And I'm going, all he did was cross it like we did back in the day. But it is what it is. Whatever I say is not going to matter anyway. But I wish there was a bit more excitement around the box, etc., rather than around the centre circle and your own half play.
Speaking of wanting to see more excitement, I'd like to talk about Chelsea of 2025. Been a bit of an interesting season, both off the pitch and on it with Enzo Maresca and the team. We're still on course in the Europa Conference League, and we're in and out of the Champions League places in the Premier League as well. Results have been on and off in terms of playing against the sides that we would expect to beat, but also the sides that we would normally struggle against. What's been your take on Chelsea so far?
Well, to be fair, the signing of Palmer is an absolute, great bit of business. I was lucky enough to go to visit the bridge against Leicester in the last month. And if he'd scored his penalty, I think we'd have gone on and won 4 or 5. In the end, we won 1-0, and it was a bit of a scrappy game that really, if it'd gone in early doors, we could have won 4 or 5, and everyone had been talking and gone away with a bit more confidence than just beating Leicester 1-0. But yeah, it's the football that all teams are playing at the moment, and Maresca is one of those that likes to keep possession. I understand it, but don't understand it. And like I said earlier, it's passes around your own half and going backwards rather than that. I'd like everybody to see. Listen, can you play forward as your first pass? Can you play forward? Can you slide someone in? Can you get out wide? Can you take someone on? That's my say philosophy, but my outlook on football is to try and play forward. And the pass game really does my head in a little bit because. But listen, 2025, that's the way it is. Somewhere down the line, later on down the line, we'll go back to chucking it in the box and getting second balls and bits and pieces like we used to. So it all goes around in circles. But at the moment, I think we're just lacking someone up front. I think to put the ball in the back of the net a bit more prolific than Jackson does. Although he gets in great positions, but unfortunately, it's not working for him at the minute. But if they go out and spend the money that they've been spending on youngsters coming up but not in the team at the moment, on someone that, a Harry Kane or someone who's established at scoring goals, then, it might be a different kettle of fish. But, they're up there. They're up there. They're in a good spot. They're doing well in Europe. But everybody wants a little bit more, and they want the Chelsea of old where they're winning the championship, etc. But will that come back? I don't know. With these young players that are coming forward, who knows? Are we going to give them a chance? Or are we going to go out and spend some more money? I don't know. Football's a strange one. You can't read into it nowadays.
Kevin, final question from me. How do you look back on your time at Chelsea Football Club?
I look back on it with so much fondness, and yeah, if I hadn't had the bad knee situation, would I have gone on and played a few more games? Who knows? I scored at both ends of the pitch. I lived my childhood dream of playing for the team and scoring goals. I'd have liked to have played a lot more, but then, when you end up playing for nearly 400 games or over 400 games in my career, I'm not sure. I had a testimony at Leyton Orient. I spent 10 years there. I'm not sure testimonials are a thing now where people are around for that long a time. But the 5 years I was at Chelsea, plus the 5 years probably I was there prior to apprenticeship days, I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And yeah, listen, I'm a Chelsea supporter, so it was just a win-win for me. So fantastic times.
Kevin, it's been fantastic to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you down at the bridge quite soon as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.